Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and this is my review of Bursting Point, a Hong Kong Chinese action thriller from 2023 that stars Nick Cheung. It was directed by Dante Lam. Now the following plot synopsis was taken from the website City on Fire. At its core, we have Nick Cheung cast as an anti-narcotics inspector who plants an undercover cop, played by William Chan, into a gang of drug traffickers. Now, Sean Tom plays the ruthless leader of the gang who suffers from a blood platelet disorder requiring regular transfusions. And after a deal goes awry, he loses his brother in the crossfire. Swearing revenge on the cops responsible and suspecting a mole in the ranks, the trio find themselves on an increasingly violent collision course. Now, the opening scene is rather short and abbreviated here. Nick Cheung has a bad guy at gunpoint, but he has to trade him because his partner is being held at gunpoint by another bad guy. And as you might expect, the bad guys all get away, but Cheung's partner is killed in the process. Then we cut to the generic mole plant story, with Cheung directing a younger cop to infiltrate bad guy organizations. But unlike your typical mole plant story, the mole in this film is very enthusiastic about going undercover. He volunteers to go back multiple times, even after his cover could have been potentially blown. So that was a little different here. This dude's very enthusiastic about risking his life. Now, the runtime of this film, I always complain about runtimes, but this one is 2 hours and 18 minutes long, because that's just how it is nowadays. It does become a bit of a problem when the subplots emerge, like when Isabella Lung shows up, good actress, and her wench of a daughter. And her daughter is a wench. But these subplots do contribute some intense moments, at the very least, and they also have indirect links to the main plot. So it's not like the subplots in this movie are like entirely useless, because they're not. They all kind of link back into the main plot. But there are times where the plot feels a little bit unfocused. Now, on the positive side, the main bad guys do stick around for the entire film, which gives them some presence, because they're tough to take down. And I like that about bad guys who, show up early and show up intermittently throughout the film and cause problems but get away. And that adds a little bit of presence for them, There are also some mini-bosses who show up. There's an unhinged dude who blackmails the cops with video footage at one point, and he's you got to get rid of that guy. I mean, after a while, he's just causing so many problems. Like, man, somebody's got to take this clown out. So I like that. So I think despite the fairly long runtime, I do think Bursting Point is still paced pretty well overall. And the pacing does not become a significant problem. Like when I reviewed Shadow Strays recently, I talked about a chunk of runtime at the end of Act 1 that's entirely dedicated to dull filler. You really don't get that with this film. It doesn't make the same mistake. And there's always some kind of violence around the corner, even when it's exploring the subplot. So that helps. Speaking of violence, this was rated Cat 3 for its depiction of blood and its dark tone. Not entirely surprising. It's not excessive, but it does get pretty nasty at times. Still, this isn't as crazy or as offensive as, like, those old school Cat 3 films from the 90s, right? But there is a sense of danger for virtually every character, and you're not sure who is going to make it out of this movie alive, and I like that. The crap hits the fan multiple times, and there's times where you're like, I don't know. Is this dude going to live or die? Is this woman going to live or die? Sometimes you're not sure, and that's a positive. Now, in terms of action, I was excited to see Dante Lam return to the more violent urban action flicks of his past, and he does deliver quite well here. Now, the first big shootout occurs very early on, takes place inside of a port/warehouse area, very well executed in terms of direction, editing, etc. Lots of gunfire. Plentiful use of grenades. It's lengthy and exciting, all right? But going into this movie, there is a surprisingly high number of hand-to-hand fights that do use some closer camera angles and I would say rather basic fight choreography. this is not as precise as what you would expect from a martial arts movie. But Bursting Point is simply not a martial arts flick. This is why I classify this movie as an action thriller. There are many scenes where the characters are simply fighting for their lives, and they're scrapping it out in like these rough and tumble fights to the death. And those scenes are very effective in their use of violence. They also become surprisingly intense at times due to the context of each confrontation, and this applies to the subplots as well. So going into this, definitely expect an action thriller hybrid. I want to emphasize this. Another big set piece takes place in what looks like an abandoned mall. The bad guy set a trap for the cops, but the mole needs to find a way to minimize cop injuries and casualties without blowing his cover. And that's a good, solid scene. And then the finale is sufficiently violent and satisfying as well. Although it would have been nice to see another big-time shootout like the opener. There is some gunplay in the finale, but it's mixed in with the survival aspects that are so prominent throughout the rest of the film. So, yeah, it's pretty effective stuff. I think Bursting Point is just a solidly entertaining action thriller. It does run a little bit long in terms of runtime, but most action movies do nowadays. And some of the thrills do move away from big shootouts, but they are effective in what they're trying to do. So this is certainly worth watching if you want to keep up with Hong Kong cinema. And it's currently available on Blu-ray. I think I got my copy from Yes Asia, and it does have English subtitles. So let me know what you think about this one. I think it's a pretty good flick, and I do see myself rewatching this, which definitely means that I recommend it. And as always, folks, I'll see you next time.